Hello. Alright, before we get started on the last half of episode 10, I was reading a letter from Michael Kelly to Len Kaczynski, and somehow I totally skipped over the one quote that he had gotten that he put in his email, where he says, "A friend of mine suggested this is a one branch family tree. Cut this tree down. We need to end the gene pool here." I have no idea how I skipped over that, but I, I hate that. I hate that he says that, because it just shows that he is, you know, that they've already got their minds made up that this whole family is awful, horrible, terrible people, and you know, that's just really sad. Like I said before, that the people that are supposed to be helping helping Brendan, are working against him because of Stephen, because of something that they believe about Stephen. Brendan is a 16-year-old kid at this point. He's not part of that, and I get it, all these people have it out for Stephen. They have something against him and his family, but Brendan's just a kid, and it is not okay for the people who are supposed to be helping you to be working against you because of someone else in your family. That's not okay. Anyway, so here we go with the rest of episode 10.
In a sense, they were working for the prosecution. Dassey's attorney, Steve Drizin, doesn't allege that they were in fact drawing a paycheck from investigators while at the same time representing Dassey. He doesn't allege that they were actively conspiring with the prosecution to get Dassey in prison for the rest of his life. They were actually working to get Dassey as little prison time as they thought possible. Remember, Dassey's confession, not the one O'Kelly walked him through, but the very detailed one that matched up amazingly well with the physical evidence, had just been ruled admissible at trial. That would have been almost impossible to rebut. Had Dassey testified in his own defense and renounced his confession, the jury would have presumed him to be lying on the witness stand. Had he refused to testify, the confession would have quite literally spoken for itself.
Okay, I just want you to remember that Len Kaczynski, before he ever met Brendan, before he ever talked to Brendan, has already made up his mind that Stephen is guilty, and Brendan, since he had confessed, I'm sure at this point he had not even heard the confession or watched the confession tape either, has already made up his mind that Brendan is guilty. So, yeah, he's trying to get him a deal to get the least amount of time possible because he believes he's guilty, which is exactly what Brendan says when he asked Judge Fox to give him a new attorney because his attorney believes he's guilty. He is not listening to him tell him, "I didn't do this. All those things that I said in the confession are not true. I was guessing. I made them up." And his attorney is not listening to him. He's not fighting for him. He's not trying to say that he is innocent. He just wants to get the best deal that he can. And I'm sorry, he should have been putting on a defense to show how the investigators, that the detectives violated their Reed training in their questioning for Brendan, how they coerced his confession, how this confession should be thrown out because it was coerced, because they violated their training, because he had no adult or attorney present while he was giving this final confession that they tweaked for the jury to hear.
So Kaczynski and O'Kelly did what they could have reasonably believed was in their client's best interest. Take a plea deal with the prosecution and testify against Stephen Avery in exchange for a lighter sentence that could have conceivably gotten the 16-year-old out of prison in his early to mid-30s. A lawyer would have been a fool to urge his client to instead go to trial and have to fight against his own damning words. This isn't working for the prosecution, it's working for the client in the manner in which the attorney reasonably believes is in that client's best interest.
Okay, that's not true. Okay? If your client is telling you that they are innocent, You need to be fighting to try to prove that they are innocent. You don't try to show that they're guilty, but they should get a lesser sentence because they're cooperating. Also, with... Okay, I'm just gonna let the guy keep talking.
Dassey had admitted to raping a woman. He admitted to helping his uncle murder her and then dispose of her body. His confession was corroborated by a mountain of physical evidence and other witnesses and was, in fact, properly secured after the interrogators not only gave Dassey a Miranda warning, but also asked him a second time whether he wanted to proceed with the questioning with...
Okay, what mountain of evidence? Really, guy, come on. Where is this mountain of evidence that supports that Brendan raped her? That supports that Brendan had anything to do with her murder? Where's this mountain of evidence that shows that he was ever even there in the trailer with Teresa? Or that she was ever in the trailer? Ever in her life? There is none. There is no mountain of evidence. The only thing that there is a pile of things that the detectives threw at Brendan to get him to talk and fed to him to make a little story out of about how he was involved and how he helped. This is not evidence. His confession is not evidence. If it's evidence of anything, it's evidence that it was coerced, that it was fed to him, that it was a made-up story, because it's not backed up by any physical, actual, real evidence that shows that any of these things happened at all.
Without his lawyer present. He indicated that he did. The full, unedited video of Dassey's interrogation shows no actual coercion from interrogators, no screaming threats, no slamming of fists onto tables, no anything that could be considered coercive.
Okay, I don't know what you think coercion means, but it does not necessarily mean that they're in his face and being threatening or violent towards him. They're not beating a confession out of him. Okay, they're playing mind tricks with a 16-year-old kid who is mentally challenged. He is not equipped to deal with that, okay, at all. And that is coercion because he is susceptible to that sort of thing. He is highly suggestible because of his age, because of his mental limitations. And I'm sorry, I'm just getting so furious at you because I don't know how anybody could watch and even come to the conclusion that there was no coercion at all. Like I said, that does not mean that he was being physically threatened or beaten or intimidated by somebody being up in their face and grilling. No, they're real calm and they're really friendly and they're really buddies with him and they want to help him and they're tricking him. Okay? They're leading him into answering questions. They're leading him into filling in these blanks for them and tying all these pieces of evidence that they have together. That's coercion. Also,
except a repeated insistence that they know Dassey is lying. Seriously, that's portrayed as coercion, telling a suspect they know he's lying. And the only serious evidence that Kuczynski provided ineffective assistance, thereby allowing Dassey to obtain a retrial, is that he was not present on May 13th, when the investigators interviewed Dassey again and convinced him to call his mother and confess to her.
all right, now, if you only look at the March 1st interrogation, I know that this was brought up at Brendan's trial, where his new attorney, the one that is trying to fight for him, asks to Wiegert or Fossbender, one of the two, do you know how many times you basically said, Brendan, you need to tell us the truth. Brendan, you're lying. Brendan, there's more to this. Brendan, what else happened? Be honest with us. in excess of 75 times. Just in that one interrogation. That's ridiculous. Okay, if I called my kid a liar 75 times, he's eventually going to change his story because he knows I don't believe what he's saying, that I want him to tell me something different than what he's saying. So we'll go back into the, oh God, what did they call it? Oh, of course I don't have that pulled up now. But anyway, go back into his psychological examination where he's giving them what they want because he doesn't want them to be upset. He doesn't want to be confrontational. He doesn't want to not cooperate because he thinks that they're trying to help him. He believes that they're trying to help him. They've convinced him of this. They've got him through all their interactions up to that point into believing that they're going to help him. They're there for him. And, you know, it's even said that he didn't even know the difference between the detectives that were working against him and his own attorneys. He didn't know the difference. He didn't understand what the hell was happening. All these people that he's got to talk to, he doesn't understand who they are and what they're there for.
He tells her that he returns to Avery's home after she sees him at their house and then leaves. A phone call that the prosecution plays at his trial in apparent violation of some gentleman's agreement not to use anything from this interview. Okay.
Yes, the gentleman's agreement, I believe, was between Len Kaczynski and the prosecution. And since Kaczynski wasn't there anymore, I guess they're just allowed to go against that gentleman's agreement because that was bullshit. They made him call her and tell her all of those things. They made him do it with the threat that if he didn't do it himself, they were going to do it. And she was going to be even more mad if she hears it from them. And so of course he complies. Of course he does. He complies with everything that they say. He never ever challenges them. Ever. Never. And he's not going to. Up to that point. But, you know, in court, different story. Because now he knows who these guys are. He knows who's who. He knows who's on his side and who's against him. And he is not going to let them push him around, trick him, fool him anymore. So, yeah, he's not afraid of them.
For the sake of argument, let's say that this one piece of evidence was obtained through a phone call that never should have been made because Kaczynski, had he been an effective lawyer, would not have allowed it. Would it have changed the outcome of the trial in any way? The jury had already heard Dassey give a detailed and corroborated confession to investigators in a 3-hour video played early on in the proceedings. Even Avery's attorneys admit that Dassey's entire case turned on whether the jury believed that confession or Dassey's claims on the witness stand that he was lying to the investigators. The phone call was largely irrelevant in light of the 3 hours worth of other evidence. So does the phone call alone warrant a finding of ineffective assistance of counsel? That may be debatable, but should Dassey receive a new trial, he will still have to go up against his own words.
Sure. Of course he will, because he said all of those things. But I hope that when he gets a new trial, if he even needs one, I hope to God he doesn't, but if he does, I know at least now his 2 attorneys are going to present more than enough evidence about the Reed violations by the detectives, about the way that they questioned him, about how they lied to him, how they fed him information, all of that. Okay, they lied to him about evidence that they had. They told him that they had his DNA in her car. So made him basically admit that he was in her car when Stephen drove it down to the pit to hide, which is a complete lie. There is no DNA, obviously. There's no fingerprints. There's no DNA, nothing of Brendan's in that car. So they just straight lied to him to get him to put himself in that car. Why? To make him more involved in covering up and helping Stephen, that he helped him all the way from the beginning to the end. Whatever. But his new attorneys are going to at least bring up his psychological exams showing that he's highly suggestible. All these things, have their experts to prove all of this, back it all up, show how they violated just every way that in the way that they questioned him. That confession was so coerced and ridiculous that it should not be believed.
That seems to be the best chance that either he or Avery has to ever be released. Because as Avery's old attorney Stephen Glynn admits, there isn't a lot of substantive evidence that could free him.
Is there anybody sitting at this table that thinks that regardless of what procedural chances he still has, he has any substantive chances?
Certainly, if we could do a test today that was scientifically acceptable and valid, that actually proved there was EDTA in those blood stains, that would be newly discovered evidence.
Right.
That might be the ticket to a new trial.
Wait, that's it? What about this supposedly obvious conspiracy by the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department to frame Stephen Avery? Forget about a new trial. Wouldn't that be a one-way ticket to complete and total exoneration? Why aren't any of these lawyers mentioning all of the evidence that they've presented that Avery was framed?
Okay, probably because they covered their asses, because they've got each other to cover their asses, because their internal investigations on all of this stuff, from what I've been told, is never going to be released to the public. We're not ever going to know what happened with them. But they obviously did some things wrong. There's all kinds of misconduct going on, but we aren't going to find out. We're not going to hear that stuff. We damn sure can't prove it because there's no videotape. There's none of their DNA. There's none of their fingerprints. There's no witnesses that caught them planting evidence. There is nothing. Okay, so that's not really an option if there's nothing there. And why is there nothing there? Because they covered it up. Obviously, do you think they're dumb enough to leave a trail of evidence behind? I mean, I hope to God that Zellner can come up and find that evidence because, maybe it is there. I hope she can find it. That would be great. But yeah, the biggest things that will help them either be exonerated or released or get new trials is going to be new testing that is available, or new evidence that proves that it was not them, or finding out who the real killer was. That's about all they've got. They've gone through their appeals, and that's where they're at right now, and that's really unfortunate. But like with Brendan, hopefully this federal magistrate will at least agree to look at the case and look and make sure that everything went correctly. And when he looks at this, he's going to obviously see that it didn't. So hopefully Brendan has a little bit better of a chance to get out, at least based on all that nonsense that took place towards him. It was Stephen. Stephen's got less options, and these are all Stephen's attorneys talking, by the way, not Brendan's. So yeah, Stephen's options are a little bit more limited. So I really hope that Zellner is able to find something, and I believe that she already has. So I can't wait to hear what this is.
Seriously, why aren't they talking about the clear-cut, plain-as-day frame-up that they argued at trial? Oh wait, Rebutting wasn't finished with the way he sees Avery could be set free.
Or some other newly discovered evidence. Other people who know something It may be somebody on the jury, it may be somebody who knows something that happened with the jurors. I've still got my suspicions about whether something improper occurred during the deliberations.
Wait, now that's it? Another vague suspicion and even vaguer allegation of wrongdoing in the jury room? This is literally the same man who spent 6 weeks at trial showing unequivocally that the Manitowoc County Sheriff's Department planted evidence against his client. Surely, if he actually had concrete admissible evidence of that, he would show it to every court that he could, right? But he doesn't.
All right. As far as the jury goes, I'm not exactly sure when you made your rebutting a murder videos, but now obviously we do know that that is something that happened. There was some nonsense going on in that jury room, in the deliberations, and the fact that they were considering evidence that was not evidence in the trial to help them come to their conclusions that guilty. That's a big deal. All right, that is something that is being investigated and looked into, and that is a possibility of getting them a new trial. The jury was tainted in some way, which it was. The jury was tainted before they even started the trial because of Ken Kratz and his ridiculous production that he put on in the media. That would have tainted me if I lived there and I heard that. Absolutely.
And he doesn't even mention it at the end of a 10-hour documentary series that purports to have proven this conspiracy too. In the end, though, Buting's hope for new EDTA testing or evidence of juror misconduct shows that neither he nor Making a Murderer have actually met their burden. Not in a court of law, and only in the court of public opinion, when theirs was the only case that was presented.
All right. What burden? The defense has no burden. They don't have to prove a damn thing. They don't even have to get up and question. They don't have to call witnesses. They don't have to do jack shit. They don't have to prove anything. That is not their burden. The burden is on the prosecution. The burden is on the state to prove that Stephen Avery or Brendan Dassey committed these crimes. And if you read the trial transcripts, if you were there as you claim to have been, I think, you should have seen that they did not meet that. I'm sorry, but every single step of the way, to me and to a lot of people, it looks like the defense just slapped them down. You put on a witness, we just slapped them down and made them look like a fool. And they did. Every step of the way. So there's no way that I can see how it's possible that the jury came up with a guilty verdict unless they were tainted. That makes no sense. Like I said, the Dean and Jerry are amazing. They're very good at what they did. They did a great job. Kratz, yeah, he pulled some nice magic tricks to keep out a lot of information and tie their hands, but they still did a pretty damn good job of slapping down everything that got thrown at them. And short of tampering, there's just no way that a jury could say guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. There's too much doubt there.
And that's how Making a Murderer should be viewed and ultimately judged, as the case for Stephen Avery, as his side of the story. It never presented the other side or even pretended to. It wasn't a search for the truth of what happened to Teresa Halbach, nor was it a search for justice for her death. Because the truth is, justice is never served when only one side is heard and a court of public opinion jumps to unsupported conclusions with torches and pitchforks in hand.
Oh, really? You know, kind of like what happened with Kratz's nice little production that he put on. What did he do? He made that angry mob of people. He made that angry mob of people. Avery's guilty. Avery did all these things, and Brendan Dassey helped him. That's exactly what they were doing. That's exactly what happened there. That's why those people were tainted. Yeah. Come on.
After hearing Avery's story, that mob was ready to pounce on a county that they simply knew to be corrupt, even though 10 episodes of insinuations, 10 hours of innuendo, in the end could never prove anything.
And again, whose fault is that? Who was offered multiple times to participate, to contribute to this documentary, and they declined. Every person on the prosecution state's side, the investigators, the police, everybody was asked to participate and asked to contribute, and they all declined or didn't answer. They didn't want to be part of it, so call it one-sided all you want. Whose fault is that? I mean, I think it's pretty awesome. If you wanted to just make a one-sided defense documentary that is all about the nastiness and bullshit that went on, I think that they would have left out the state's evidence. I think they would have left out the state's trial portions. They would have not included what they thought was the state's best evidence going on what they claim is their most powerful pieces of evidence. And, you know, they did the best that they could to show a fair picture. This is not about Stephen Avery. It's not about Brendan Dassey. It's about the judicial system and all the bullshit that went on in this trial, that all of the people like us should care about. This can happen to any of us, and we should all care about this. That's what this was about. This is not about the people. It's one example, only one example of what's happening in the judicial system that needs to be changed, that needs to be looked at. One example. There's a lot, by the way.
Is that justice for Teresa, for Stephen, for Manitowoc County, for this nation's system of justice itself? We as viewers, we as citizens, owe it to ourselves to hear as many sides of the story as we can, which is why a rebuttal to Making a Murderer was so badly needed in the first place, because the series was Stephen Avery's story from start to finish, and it's only fitting that the last words of that story are his. The truth always comes out, sooner or later.
Yeah, the truth always comes out. Guess what? It's about to come out. I have no doubt at all that Kathleen Zellner is not going to just blow it wide open with some facts, with some truth, with some real evidence to show who, what, how, when, and everything she possibly can, because she can do that. Because she is doing a real investigation, something that these detectives and the police did not do. But she's doing it, and it's going to come out. And I cannot wait to hear it. I cannot wait to see it. I am excited. And you might have felt like you needed to rebut Making a Murderer, but I feel like I needed to rebut you, because you have so many of your facts wrong. So much of your information is extremely one-sided. You obviously have not... Sorry, this is so distracting. I'm sorry, it's really rude. You obviously have not looked into the evidence here any further than what it sounds like. You just watched the documentary and read a couple of documents, and that's all. And then this is how you base your information. I mean, you there's so much information out there. I can't even start to touch it. There's so much, and I'm doing the best I can. I'm one person. I don't have a whole team working for me. I'm one person just trying to read as much as I can, and this is how I inform myself to make my own opinions, my own decision based on the facts of the documents that I found. And it just would have been nice if you would have done that yourself a little bit deeper than you chose to go, because you missed a lot. And that's really unfortunate, because you present this very well. You sound very credible, but I'm not an attorney. I'm not trained. I'm just a girl. I'm just a girl with a lot of damn time. And, someone like you who might have more influence, better words, better ways to put things, more of an audience to reach, I would have hoped that you would have put more time into it than me. Nobody, just a girl. And that's very disappointing. Anyway, I'm gonna end this, and I will definitely be making some more videos with some other things soon. Thanks for watching.